You are looking at the legendary Winter Garden Theater, where just moments from now, CNN will broadcast the 5-time Tony-nominated play Good Night and Good Luck, starring George Clooney, live around the world. I'm Pamela Brown, here on the corner of 51st and Broadway in the heart of Midtown Manhattan. This is the first time ever a Broadway play will be televised live, and you can really feel the excitement here. You can see the crowd filing in to be a part of this historic moment. And I want to take you inside that theater. Here is a live look right inside where you see the audience is starting to get seated. All the cameras are in place inside, 20 cameras inside to bring this to you live. And Good Night and Good Luck, George Clooney plays the role of the legendary journalist Edward R. Murrow, who famously held power to account in the 1950s by exposing Senator Joseph McCarthy and his anti-communist campaign. And as we count down to the start of the show at the top of the hour, we're going to take you behind the scenes of this Tony-nominated production, and you'll learn more about the life and career of Edward R. Murrow. But I want to begin with two very important people at the center of this production, the play's director, David Cromer, and Grant Heslov, who co-wrote and co-produced this play with George Clooney. It is so great to have you both with us. It's such an exciting night. I know we're all kind of feeling the nerves here. Grant, I want to start with you because this really is your dream coming true. 20 years ago, you were thinking about this being a live broadcast. How does it feel for this to finally be happening?
It's surreal. You know, we wrote it originally to do as a live teleplay on CBS, and Janet Jackson did something on TV, and we were told we couldn't do a live show anymore, so we turned it into a film. But now here we are, and David's turned it into this beautiful production that everybody's going to get to see tonight.
Right, because as the director, David, you were thinking of this as for the stage, and now this goes beyond the stage tonight. This is going on people's television sets around the world.
Yeah, it's a couple of interesting steps. Yeah, my job was to kind of walk the last. I mean, you've been with us so long. My job was to walk the last couple of miles with you all on the way into the theater, and then
He's very modest.
And then you guys created this. I was going to say, you know, this is great. You're finally getting to do it live.
Finally getting to do it live.
And you actually, Grant, you co-wrote that script with George Clooney for a movie that came out in 2005. It was timely when it came out then, but could you have ever imagined it would be even timelier 20 years later?
Yeah, I always knew. No,
Really?
No. No.
You had a crystal ball.
Depending on what you think, we were lucky or we were unlucky. But yeah, it's. I think when you're writing about journalism and people speaking truth to power, there's probably never a bad time to talk about it. It just happens to be. It just happens to resonate more right now. And then obviously everything that's happening with CBS. Yeah, it's pretty timely.
It's very timely. And so that leads me to my next question to you, David. You know, this is a play about broadcast news and the role it played in the 1950s. This is airing tonight, again, worldwide, on a network that broadcasts news. What do you hope the CNN audience will take away from tonight?
It is always, always, always a good time to know our history. It is always immediate to look at our history. When we forget about it for a little bit, if we think now is the only time things have been rough or bad or confusing or scary, it's always. This is an incredibly important part of our history, and it's an important part of our history in terms of how we receive information. And to spend time with this is just I think it's always a good time for this.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that because in reading about you, in other interviews you've done, you talked about how you typically don't do plays that have political overtones or maybe historical moments. So what drew you to this play?
You paid him a lot of money.
It paid me a lot of money.
Well, there you go.
No, I don't. I try not to think that I'm going to do anything that is really resonant and immediate. It might be immediate for people emotionally about their lives, about getting through the day and stuff like that. I don't end up doing things that are about history, but I am passionate about history, and it was thrilling to do that. It suddenly felt like a new kind of resonance, a new kind of relevance to doing my work. So it was what drew me to it was that I hadn't done it. and that I'm never going back.
Well, there you go. Never
Yeah.
going back. And it's been breaking records in terms of sales. You know, George Clooney, obviously a starring role as Edward R. Murrow. But at the time when the movie came out, Grant, as you well know, he was Fred Friendly. He wasn't Edward R. Murrow.
Yeah.
He has said that he didn't feel like he had the gravitas to play it then.
He didn't.
Really?
No, you know, when we wrote it, we rewrote it for him to play the part. And at a certain point, he looked at me. He's like, "You think I can play this?" And I said, "I don't know if you have it yet." And he's like, "Yeah, I don't feel like I have." We always feel like Murrow had the weight of the world on his shoulders, you know. And David Strathairn, who played it in the film, that's who he is. But now, George, with age and wisdom, he's right. The reason he played Fred Friendly is that was the only way we could get the movie made. You know, if you ever saw Fred Friendly, you know Fred Friendly was like 6'8", and he was a big hulking, you know, brute of a man. But
Right.
Didn't look like George Clooney.
he didn't look. I think he wanted to look like George Clooney.
Well, there you go. And David, you say you get really emotional every time you read Edward R. Murrow's words. How important was it to make sure that emotion was captured and that you were true to those words from the 1950s?
Well, it was always their intent to be as accurate as we could. It is an entertainment. It is not perfectly lined up with every moment in history, but Murrow's words are Murrow's words, very, very rigorously. And very important. George is an actor of enormous subtlety. He's very interested in a straightforward approach to it, as am I. Straightforward approach to theater, and it is to deliver the words clearly and honestly and let them have their effect. And that's sort of the power of his acting. It's the power of those words. And the intention was to do it as simply, purely, straightforwardly, looking straight into the camera with as much integrity as we possess, as we can pull out of every one of ourselves. And that's just the approach to it. It was just to let the words do the work, make them clear. He became a journalist. He started as an educator. He was interested in education. He was interested in that an enlightened population is, an educated population is an enlightened population, and that is how we advance as a civilization.
And it's actually, I wonder if that weighed in on the opening speech for the play, because it's less about, what happened with Senator McCarthy and the McCarthyism, and more about the television and the power of technology.
Yeah.
Grant.
And it's even now, because we've gone beyond television. You know, now it's the internet, with the internet and with these devices. Everything's even more amplified and faster. And so all those things that he talks about in that the box of lights and wire speech, which is really his most famous speech, really did come to pass. And that that's at the downturn of his career. That's at the end of a guy looking back and saying, "Holy, let's be cautious, be careful."
All right. Thank you both, David, Grant.
Thank you.
Can't wait to see it tonight. We are just moments away.
You need a ticket?
I actually have already seen it. I did my homework. I went to see it.